Let's talk with Jace in Minnesota. Jace, welcome to the show. You're on with Vi and Jon. How can we help you today?
This is really awesome, by the way. I'm a Norse polytheist.
Cool.
And I want to talk about the division and polytheism.
Okay. So a little just quick clarification here. Neither of us, I don't believe, are polytheists. Jon, unless there's something you're not telling me, you're not a...
Unless there's something about myself I'm unaware of, yeah.
So definitely...
Did you say Norse polytheism? Is that what did I hear that right?
I believe it's Norse, like the Norse gods. Thor,
Norse,
Loki,
yeah, N-O-R-S-E, yep.
Okay, well, we would love to talk with you, but we probably are going to move you towards the direction of what you believe and why. So feel free to loop in any divisions, but we're probably going to get sort of philosophical and theological on you in a minute, so fair warning.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about something. We've all heard about the new game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right?
I'm a bad millennial. I do not know about that.
I've heard of it, but I'm not terribly familiar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's a big game that came out, and there's been we had two sides. There's hard polytheism and soft polytheism.
Okay.
And I call this, and in a lot of ways, people are taking it like, oh, let people discover about our faith. And some people, I don't really like this because they're getting misconceptions. And every pagan has ever realized that romanticization is the #1 bitch. And when you get into it, you have to get past them. And the Valhalla has two sides and it's dividing. And people are actually disputing about it and it's nonstop. But if you want to ask theological questions, I'm not really in the mode to have an aggressive conversation. Just if you want to ask general questions, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, neither Jon or I are particularly aggressive today, so I don't think we're going to get into a yelling match. But I am curious because I want to understand kind of the basics here before we get into, divisions and different factions, because I feel like that's a useful place to start. So, Jace, tell me a little bit about what you believe and why.
Oh, so, okay. Why is a very good question. I believe in the Norse gods and goddesses. I particularly believe in the Norse gods and goddesses, and I usually start with the definition, because, definitions, we all know. This definition is varied. I have my own definition. Everybody has their own definition. So the Norse gods and goddesses are superhuman, supernatural beings that are outside and inside of time. That's kind of where I usually start.
Okay.
Polytheism, let's start here. Let's start here because this is going to help you understand my whole point of view. Polytheism has two sides, hard polytheism and soft polytheism. You've heard one theory that like the gods are the same. They're all polytheistic faiths. That's soft polytheism. Hard polytheism, I accept that other gods, but I believe in these set of gods exactly. It's a lot more strict.
Got it. Okay. So question for you then. How did you determine that these gods existed?
Very good question. So I guess a lot of anecdotal experiences. Everybody has their own overarching anecdotal experiences. Those some people can dismiss them, know what you can take of them. But anecdotal experiences, I don't want to. There's too many reasons to say so.
Well, okay. So is anecdotal evidence and kind of like personal experience and the personal experiences of other people, would you consider that like the big one? Like everyone has multiple reasons for believing anything, but we can usually pinpoint like, yes, this is the one that really clinched it for me.
Yes. I guess that's really what it took. And I know a lot of people stand against that position, but that's really what I took.
Okay. All right.
Is there like a specific experience that maybe you'd want to share with us that sort of is like maybe the thing that you're like, I had this experience and that's like when I experience a moment of doubt, I come back to this because I know this is true. Do you have something like that you'd want to talk about? And
Sure. I would be more than lovely to just explain it, Jon. So
cool.
I had this conversation. I had this. So you're gonna say they're wrong, they're denied. I can't really give you any proof and say believe in this, but here's a few experiences. So after just doing a offering to the gods, this was my first experience ever. I maybe, sure, for example, I did it in the past, but I didn't do it with passion, nor did I have a lot of education or information about my faith. So I sat down, I gave an offering to the gods, and the description about the offering, I gave water, and then I gave celery and just normal steak. That's all it was. I work in a lot of like a farming agricultural area, so this is where I was able to offer that. Maybe 5 minutes later, I see just this. It said that after an offering, an eye will appear, and this is supposed to be representational, almost symbolizing or symbolic of the All-Father Odin. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'm a big believer in like not having one experience should justify it. It should be more multiple. I have others that are just far more crazy.
Okay. So I will say that for a while, I identified as a Wiccan and did a lot of like spells and rituals myself. And I was able to get into some crazy headspaces without any kind of substance, without any kind of, you know, physical addition to what I was already doing. I was able to give myself some really intense experiences. But that was it was an intentional process that I have since realized is just me hijacking my own brain and allowing my brain to play in this fun space. So I still do a lot of rituals. I still, you know, play around with the whole witchcraft thing. But from a purely secular perspective, which is, hey, this is something that I'm doing to hijack my brain and to give myself fun experiences that otherwise I wouldn't have access to as a skeptic. So I'm playing in that space and connecting with that part of myself. But you'll forgive me if I don't find an altered experience after doing a ritual with the intention of pursuing some kind of experience as particularly compelling from a supernatural standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about Wiccanism I find fascinating because a lot of people, I have a group of friends, they call me theologian because like I'm just super in depth with knowledge. I research all the time. But Wiccanism, I do have some issues with Wiccanism.
Oh, same here.
That's coming from a person who does a lot of folk and traditionalist work, and I do a lot of just like constructionalism and just all of this. I do have issues, but you can do whatever you want. I'm more of like, just go do what you want. With that, you actually, there is a position of polytheism that says, it's called paganism.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Whatever you want to say. Yeah. So this terminology, this might be useful because we don't call them polytheists, but they believe that the gods are not real, but in some way we can produce like these psychological effects on ourselves. That's a position you might be interested in exploring. I'm not saying like you're going to take it. I hate people. For example, I grew up, I was baptized a Catholic, then I became a Buddhist, then I was an atheist, or agnostic atheist, and then I came to Norse Polytheism. That's a whole nother story, anecdotal evidence, as we talk about convincing. But anyway, I find that interesting. I found that super fascinating. I've actually always been interested in Wiccan, studied it. I understand about the feminine and the masculine god, right? So like all the gods, there's a masculine god to go under that one god, and then like, right, if I'm correct about that.
That is one perspective. I know one of the things that was interesting to me about Wicca is that, you know, some people were the dual god and goddess, some had that triple goddess, some were very much atheo-pagan in the sense that they viewed the gods as more of like metaphors and that concept of being able to enter the altered states, but without the supernatural, you know, this thing exists component. And I love that you brought that up because that's my next question for you, Jace. So right now you've presented me with two kind of conflicting worldviews, right? One, let's say, is atheo-paganism. I hope I'm saying that correctly, which is that there are people who believe in the gods, but as metaphorical beings that maybe tapping into that metaphor and thinking about it and producing rituals designed around it might allow you to experience things. But from a purely naturalistic standpoint, versus what you believe, which is that these gods actually exist as beings and are interacting with you. How would you show the difference between the two? How would you, if I were to say, both of those sound interesting, but I'm not convinced that yours is the correct one, how would you show the difference between the two?
Yeah, good question. I get this question a lot from people just getting into the faith. I usually give this an example, right? So what's different between mine and that is atheopaganism says that the gods exist in a purely abstract psychological force, and they're only like psychological moods. Like you already get that. We already got that down. My position is that the gods can be metaphysical or outside of time, and they can also be inside of time where they can just take physical form. And in the past, it's been called almost like shape-shifting. But we past that definition because it's too much of a tribalistic term. I would say that in a lot of ways that's a difference, is that they're taking things out. And the position is that they actually don't believe the gods exist. They just believe it's psychological effects. Right.
That's why they're called so I think I may have misphrased this question, because you did do a very good job of explaining what both camps believe. Do you know the phrase, the concept of Occam's razor?
Oh, yes, I actually have. And I don't know what it actually means. I've looked it up. Yeah. Wikipedia gave us a poor fucking, like,
yeah, Wikipedia is not the best place to go for these kinds of things, unfortunately. So let me give you a rundown of this, because I love that you've heard this before, and I love that I can maybe answer your question about what it means. Essentially, the conceit there is that the simplest explanation is probably closest to the truth. And the goal is to weed out everything extraneous that doesn't need to be in there to explain a thing or a phenomenon. And then whatever remains is probably the most likely explanation until proven otherwise. So when I'm hearing what you're saying to me, I'm hearing that atheopaganism is giving an explanation for these experiences that people have as a purely psychological thing. And I already know that psychological phenomena exist in a naturalistic state, so I'm down with that. That to me explains the concept of God encounters and experiences. So now you're coming in and you're adding on this extra level, which is actual gods and goddesses that exist outside of time and have these other traits. And to me, that's not following Occam's razor of the simplest explanation, which would be that they are psychological states and metaphors to help induce those. So my question is, what about your experience would allow me to expand my definition to include these other components, which are actual beings and gods?
This is a very interesting question, and let me dissect what you're saying.
For sure.
To make it simpler for you, is this what I'm hearing, right? Okay, so I got this for you. I got you. Okay.
All right, I'm down. Let's do it.
So we buckle in, and I'll say this as simply, and I skip this. The gods are basically gods are outside of time and they're inside of time. So basically they're outside of space, time, and matter, and then they can come into space, time, and matter. And then in a lot of ways, there's this metaphysical state where they can actually, so they initiate and induce psychological effects or literal effects, whatever. I've heard more psychological effects, but I've heard the literal testimonies. Got to be careful with those. We come to the understanding that that's kind of like the basis I run off of people.
Okay.
I mean, the thing with polytheism is it's such a varied belief.
Oh, for sure. No, I am well aware. I cannot make any claims about polytheism as a whole because it is extremely varied. I guess my whole thing is still, how do you know, right? Like, we have we are agreed that people have these psychological experiences. I fully believe that it's something that you experience, that other people have experienced these things. I'm not questioning that. But I want to know how you got from, I had this psychological experience that might be explainable by natural phenomena, and instead went in the direction of there are beings that exist outside of space-time and can take form at will and enter into a material state. To me, there's a huge gap there. Do you see that gap, or at least where I'm seeing the gap between the experience and the ontological claim of other beings?
Yeah, yes. So, yeah, actually, let me explain this.
Mm-hmm.
The best word I can give to you is, and I'm sorry, I've actually, no, and you're not the first person I've told you this. I've told you this. There's many, I've told many people this. It's faith. You take it what you want. I guess it's a 50-50. I see the only intellectual honesty would be faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's from a position of you trying to stand on your own point.
Okay.
And I mentioned it because it sounds something like you would be interested in. And if you want to check it out, I forgot the author of this book, but it's called Atheopaganism on the Rise. It's really interesting. She's from a practitioner standpoint where she does what she does, and she can give like an interesting standpoint. She can justify it, but I don't know if you want to read an 800-page book. And be like,
hey, I'm down for thick books. That's my jam. Jace,
I have a quick
Jon,
question.
yes,
if you don't, I'm curious. You know, it sounds like you've done a bit of a religious pub crawl, sort of sampling a bunch of different things. What is there something about your current beliefs that you feel like has made a positive difference in your life that maybe other beliefs didn't? Have you felt that? Is that part of your experience, or?
The whole situation, yeah. So that is part of it, but there's other reasons, and I don't like to you understand, like, when I don't want to make that a single strand, because if I make it that single strand, there's many arguments to go, well, this is not a true experience. There's other experiences, but this does have a positive effect on me. As other faiths have, I don't doubt that other things can have a positive effect. I have just found this has been the best for me. And it's kind of like not everybody has the same shoe size. Just happens this fits me right. Maybe that other person fits that right. Maybe Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Shintoism, whatever they choose to pick. It's interesting, yeah, and you're right. I wouldn't call it a pub walk.
I was just joking around. But yeah, I guess the core of my question was like, if you've settled on this belief as, you know, because it's one thing, like if you feel that it's literally true, or if you feel like it's useful to you, or both, you know. And I'm curious about the usefulness part.
Okay, so yeah, but I want to address something earlier. Right? So I'm still on a path.
Oh, okay.
I say to people, because this space is a lot about paths, and everyone has their own path. And so I'm like 90%, right? That's at the point I have. I've been a lot. I've done a lot, and it's kind of like the faith that I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. Just give me a second. Sorry, I'm trying to I have a sore throat.
Oh, sorry about that.
Get tested.
Yeah, right. Get that swab. Jace, we're going to need to move on to the last caller, but this was fascinating. I love it when people who are not just Christians call the show, because these are conversations that can be applicable across the board. And honestly, I love learning about polytheism and want to learn more about it. So I might check out that book, first of all. But also, if you want to call back and kind of come to us with the idea of how do you determine that these beings exist in a way that maybe would be convincing to somebody else who maybe did not have that same experience as you, that would be a conversation I would love to have in the future.
I think we can do that. I was an OO speaker for almost all my life. So I all know about persuasive speaking, original oratory. Thank you for your time. May the gods be with you. And just one thing, I want to give Jon something. I want to leave with Jon something.
Sure. Thanks, Jace.
You still hear me?
Oh, I've got you.
Yeah, actually, man, I would want you to check out, so one or two things, Viking myths and sagas and the Poetic Edda, or check out the rationalheathen.org. Check that out. Check out also the channel Wisdom of Odin. sorry, he's a really good man. He's actually been doing really good. He's been doing everything. Check everybody who wants to check him out. He gives more justification to my.
All right, we will do some research, and in return, you should call back. We'll do some research on our end, and then you call back. Deal?
A deal. But yeah, wisdom of.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jace.
All right. I like to cut. I usually cut people off when they start like pitching stuff. It's not necessarily the platform for that.
Sure.
But hey, recommend me a book. I'm down.
Yeah, yeah. And Norse Polytheism. I can't say that's something that I've spent a lot of time studying. So.
Yeah, I have one of my very close friends is actually a Norse polytheist. He's read the Edda, and he finds a lot of value in it. It's super cool. I personally am not convinced by it, but hey, we can be allies in a whole bunch of other ways, right?
Yeah, and I'm always curious. That's why I sort of asked, like, what effect is this having in your life? What benefit do you feel? Because he obviously he's curious, right? Like he's gone and checked out a lot of different sort of belief sets and ways of being, and he's found something that, or at least it doesn't sound like he's fully committed to it, but at least tentatively committed. And I'm always curious for someone who's done that, like what is it what's it manifesting in your life, you know?
Right. What is it giving you that other things can, especially if there's a version of your religion that can be purely naturalistic and backed up by evidence? Like, why not pick that one?
Then it could, yeah, because then it's something that you could sort of take and just go like, well, this is, like you said, I mean, this is a metaphorical thing for me. This is something that
still super meaningful and valid, but maybe not tied with so much, ontological baggage.
Sure.